All right, and we are live. Welcome to the BrainDrive weekly development call update live stream. Our mission here at BrainDrive is to build a superior user-owned alternative to big tech AI systems. I'm Dave Waring, and I handle the operations side here at BrainDrive.
And I'm Dave Jones, and I handle the technical operations side here at BrainDrive.
This is the point in the call where we normally show the platform that we've built. But for anyone who's been following along over the last couple of weeks, you'll know that we decided to archive the old BrainDrive core platform, which is still, on the repo and live for anyone who was using it. But the reason we decided to do that is the agentic capabilities of AI have really progressed so quickly that Dave and I really feel like we need a different architecture that's built for the future of AI and also the rapid progression that we're currently in. So we've spent the last few weeks thinking deeply about that. We've released a new architecture that we're going to be building on top of called the Personal AI Architecture. You can see that at personalaiarchitecture.org. And that's meant to be a protocol or an architecture blueprint that anyone can build a personal AI system on top of, where it puts your memory at the center of the system so you can always take that with you. And then it makes every other component of the system swappable so you can upgrade your personal AI system at the speed of AI. And we're working towards building the first implementation of that architecture, which will be BrainDrive, and other people can build implementations on top of the same architecture. And if you follow the principles outlined in the architecture, you'll have that same no lock-in capability that the architecture is designed to give everyone. And you can build a competitor to BrainDrive, or you can build a complement to BrainDrive, or this is really meant to really drive the future of user-owned AI. And we're now moving on to the implementation phase of this. So I'm just going to give a couple of short, big picture overview items, and then Dave will take over for the rest of the call, and we'll talk through the development process that he's been working through. Um, so the biggest thing here is having all this stuff ready to go before the call.
It's
uh,
usually that first hurdle.
Yes. So I put out a blog post on my personal blog over the weekend entitled Factories and the Future of Software. And you can read this at davewaring.com. That's my personal blog. But the general idea here is, this factory analogy I think works really well because in the early days of factories, the before electricity, factories were built with their own power station, and that was the steam engine. And you really built the whole factory around the fact that this power source needs to be included in the factory in order for it to work. And software is similar today in that but prior to AI, you needed the intelligence of the software built into the software itself. And that was, not artificial intelligence, but deterministic functions and all the things that make software what it is. You couldn't just plug intelligence into a piece of software like you plug a machine into a wall. Now you can do that. You can plug intelligence in the form of an AI model into any software, but up until recently, really not much had changed because of that. And so, why is that the case? Well, when we look back at this factory analogy, the same sort of things are true today with software that were true in the past with factories. Initially, when electricity came along and was invented, the factories didn't implement it, or if they did, they just replaced their steam engine with an electric engine. And why wouldn't they implement it, right? It's this great new
Yeah.
thing. Well, they already came with their own power source. And so replacing the power source, if you already have a power source, you might get some benefit by using the new technology. But if you're just using it the exact same way, it's certainly not going to be revolutionary and probably not worth your time and energy. To really benefit from the new invention, which was electricity, you really had to re-architect the factory. And this is where people like Ford came up with the assembly lines and all that type of stuff. And we really started to see the explosion of productivity in the Industrial Revolution. is when those factories were re-architected around the new technology and basically built from the ground up. So we haven't seen much or anywhere near the disruption that I think a lot of people would have expected from AI, but that's because these softwares come with their own power source, right? But now they also have the ability to call tools, right? And this allows the software to be decoupled from the functions, right? So this combination of on-demand intelligence, like on-demand electricity, the software no longer needs to come with its own power source, its own intelligence, and the ability to break those functions apart now into tools is really this like this is where kind of the factory analogy breaks down and it becomes more like a human, right? You need a brain and a hand, and then you can hold any tool, right? And once you sort of grasp this, all you really need is the equivalent of a brain and a hand, and then that software can hold any tool. You can see that these giant code bases that have all the intelligence built in and all the functions and all the tools, like that would be like so inefficient. It would be like having all the tools that you're going to use as a human velcroed to your hand, right? It would be very complicated to get that to work. And that's why we have these giant code bases and all of this and takes millions of dollars and tons of developers to maintain it is it's way too complicated. And we're moving to a world where all you're going to need is the digital brain and the digital hand, and you can hold any tool. And while initially, when Dave and I recognized this, we were like, oh shit, we have to throw away the platform that we've built for the last year. But then we started to get really excited because it's a hell of a lot easier to have a digital brain and a digital hand that can hold any tool than it is to build the whole platform like we were trying to do before. Because we only need to really make sure that we own our digital brain and our digital hand, and then we can use any tool. We can build those tools, but even more excitingly, it opens up the entire open source community and all the tools that everyone's building to be held by that digital hand. So it makes our mission of building a superior user-owned alternative to big tech AI systems much easier and much faster to actually do that. And so we're super excited about that. Anything you want to add to that, Dave?
Um, Other than there's tons of examples to demonstrate why, and we even had this moment when we first started BrainDrive of why the advantage would be to people who could just take everything they've been doing and shelving it. And there have been a few examples of where this has been done and hasn't been done. You were talking about recently, Cobalt would be a great example of something that just stood there and it was in your way of productivity in the future, but the fact that it worked, the people that had invested millions of dollars in having COBOL applications up into the Y2K area, they were like, okay, this works. We can't do anything about it. They were first in a race just to find developers who still even wanted to do that kind of job. Because I know I was offered many times. I took it in college and they were like, hey, you want to work on Cobalt? We'll pay you X. And I'm like, never. Never will I do I want to touch that. That's like, hey, um, because it's just that kind of language. But this is the same thing. The language is changing now. The software developer, your role is changing. So in both cases, you have to adopt. And when we started BrainDrive, the first version, one of the things that I said, what advantage doing BrainDrive with a plugin system that would give us an advantage over everybody else? Well, in order for somebody to keep up at that moment, they would have to scrap their code, build it on a completely plug-in architecture, rebuild it from the top up. Because if you came in behind and you said, okay, now with whatever you have, we'll call it a Twinkie, and your Twinkie now is a plug-in system. Well, it's only on the outskirts and what you've connected. It's not the entire application. And this is the same thing. We've, seeing a past year, we learned a lot. We realized quickly that the atmosphere and ecosystem was changing, not just for software development, but the user's expectations. Because when we first doing BrainDrive, we were like, Docker, most users are like, no thanks. The minute they heard Docker, I don't want to do that. Now they're like, Docker, okay, I have that installed already, type thing. So it really changes what we can accomplish. And the skill level of the users are slowly incrementing up as far as the tools. Because with Docker, you don't have to know the tech stuff. People like me have already handled that. You just have to, oh, I have Docker. It comes up and starts running, and you're happy. So that's basically what I have to add. And you're muted still.
And we're seeing a lot of people in the terminal with Claude Code and
You're a
Codex,
perfect
myself
example of that
included.
crowd.
Yeah. Because I don't have to do any like crazy commands or anything. I'm just using it as a chat
Yep.
interface, which everyone already knows how to do. So we've got a lot of plans, based on this, but same mission. Mission hasn't changed.
Nope.
How we're going to implement it has, and we feel like while this has been one step back, it's definitely many steps forward as we get this rolled out. And so I think with that, we can transition to what happened last week and what are we
Yeah.
planning on working on this week.
Well, last week we started with an architecture. And that, for the lack of better words, was nothing more than a blurb. This is what the blueberry muffins taste like. Here's a picture of them. Now, will that come together? We didn't know at that point. And so we were like, we knew initially, Dave spent, I think, 2 to 3 weeks working on the architecture alone. And then it was like, finally got to the point where he was like, okay, Dave, have at it. Let's see if this thing holds water. And so the first thing was, of course, I was thinking ahead and I wanted to use open code. And I don't know if last week covered that, but from my thought process, open code becomes the ideal vehicle for this, not from a developer standpoint, but for the fact is this can become another tool in BrainDrive if done correctly, because then you can get to the point where, and the people that did OpenClaw seen it, when you can tell the AI, develop me a new tool, and it does it for you. Or why worry, David, how he uses the terminal. He doesn't worry about how to connect something together. He just tells Claude, connect this to Gmail. And then it goes, okay, give me a minute. Let me see what you got here. You need to put your password here. And boom, Dave's connected to Gmail without ever reading a single document.
Yes, but I hate using Claude because I don't own and control it, and I'm
There,
worried about getting locked into that. So
this is where open code
enter
comes
enter
along.
Open Code, which is an
Yes.
awesome project, and I think a great example of we don't need to build everything here. There's already a great open source
Yep.
community. So the best open source IDE or the best open source agentic coding platform
Yep.
is open code. I think they're undefeated in that, I would
Yeah.
say.
I can't find anybody that even comes close, both of functionality, maturity, and offering continued functionality keep up because they try to duplicate Claude as much as possible or
So
Claude
if we
code.
can't, if we can build BrainDrive, the implementation with open code,
Yep.
then not only are we making sure we're not locking the project into a coding tool,
Yep.
right, which is a point of lock-in, it's open source.
Yep.
But also what Dave's saying is then we get that agentic code. Every BrainDrive owner that
Yep.
uses BrainDrive going forward gets that agentic coding capability built into their BrainDrive, which is
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So when you type in and say, "Hey, I'd like to do some web scraping," so you start off with what web scraping, and I always that's low hanging fruit for me because everything I do almost involves, hey, going out finding information and bringing it back to me. I don't need a bookmark. I want the information. So it's
Yes.
like, so the ability to say, "Hey, I don't have a web scraper." First thing I want you to do is go look to see if there's something out there. And if there is, and it works well, or I already have an idea what I want you to use, then I tell it, hey, I want you to create a component for me that fits within the BrainDrive architecture that I can use. And then I go get a sandwich because that's what it should do. And that's the perfect world for me. So that's why I was like, I spent a lot of
Yes.
time up front. Can this tool build the architecture we want? And can the architecture we want work with this tool and hold water?
And that time well spent.
Yep.
Even if it hadn't worked, but it sounds like it does work.
I can't find a single inch. The only thing, like I said, right now I won't say stuck. Right now I'm moving between what I call the proof of concept. It works. It will call a tool when I expect it to call a tool. It calls the intelligence when I expect it to call the intelligence. I have developed several skills that I'm still fine tuning to go through and validate each component against the architecture to ensure, one, how closely are we following it as a architecture itself, noting where possible drift points are, because as with everything, as it grows and you hammer against it, you see drift points started getting exposed. And this is where it's like I need to figure out, can we lock the code a little better? Or is this an architecture where we can lock down, come up with better answers for, hey, when you encounter where this prompt belongs, this is how it should be done to follow the architecture. And then as Dave and I talked last Friday, we need to take the architecture itself, which is a great War and Peace novel. But for AI, we have to tone it down and get right to the facts. This is what the engine looks like. This is what it does. This is what it can't do. This is what it needs to do. And this is where you do not pile in different behaviors into a different component. And then examples after that. This is what, if you want to do X, Y, Z, you need to do X, Y, and then over here put Z.
And our
Um,
goal with this is to not only build a successful implementation for BrainDrive on top of the architecture, but give the blueprint, expand the blueprint for
yep.
any builder who wants to build an implementation on top of the personal AI architecture so that you don't have to go through this same, figuring everything out from scratch journey. And we can all start building on each other's knowledge and open sourcing that as our attack vector on these closed source AI
Yeah,
systems.
and if anybody comes along in 6 months, a year, they could not they don't have the hassle of at that point you try to fully establish code base that's like 1,000 lines or however lines. They can go say, okay, let me read the architecture first. Okay, then you did a proof of concept first, and that'll be locked in. We won't be playing with it unless we touch the architecture. So they'll be able to see a very small microcosm of what I call the 4x2, which has the four components and then the two APIs. And that's all that's there. And they'll be able to see it as if, hey, we left it there for you on purpose so that you can, okay, the second step they did is they did this. So let me read this code because this is smaller. And then you can take all that knowledge and either go, I want to look at what you guys did with BrainDrive. I'm going to look at what maybe somebody else did because by that point, somebody else could have came along and said, hey, I'm going to do Gmail Drive. Go ahead. Your call. We're not going to stop you. Um, and then they can go, okay, I feel confident enough to do my own. And you can use all of these as references, use AI to reference them so they can say, hey, I want to do their engine. I just want to do XYZ. I want two libraries. You get crazy. It'll be up to you.
And it's been designed to be simple enough for one developer with your AI coding agents to be able to handle everything so that the team does not become a point of lock-in for this personal AI
Yep.
architecture. The person who owns that AI system can manage it and code it and everything themselves with their AI coding agents. And
Yeah, because
this is really, there's a lot more talent outside of these big tech companies than there is internal to them. And this is going to unlock that is our goal here, because Dave and I by ourselves aren't going to be able to build a superior alternative to big tech AI when they have trillions of dollars in funding and thousands of employees and access to all the latest technology. But there's a million Dave and I's out there in the
yep.
open source community, and we're hoping that this will unite all of us around a standard architecture and a standard way of building. Or even if you're not following the personal AI architecture, just building in a way where any digital brain and hand can use any tool is going to be enough. You don't really have to build on the personal AI architecture for that piece to fall into place.
You could build your own business off this. It doesn't have to be personal. It could be your business memory
Right.
and you have the interfaces become your client facing forms. They can fill them out. They can leverage your knowledge base. They can exchange ideas with you however you envision it. You don't have it with this. You don't even have to worry about trying to establish your entire corporate back end. You follow the same philosophy of the architecture. You build the components you want, however you want the interface to be, and it's up and running. It's that simple.
Yep, and we've adjusted our mission document. The mission statement remains the same as it's always been, build a superior user-owned alternative to big tech AI systems so that the power of AI belongs to the people. But now we have a really clear vision on how that works at the different levels. So there's the architecture, which is the ground level, and that's designed to accumulate power to the people. There's the BrainDrive implementation, which is also MIT licensed open source. So it's the user-owned AI system. So that's the power to the people at the individual level. And what Dave's starting to talk about is the ecosystem. And this is where we really start to get that compounding flywheel of open source power going where it's going to be very difficult for a closed ecosystems to compete with an open ecosystem generally, but especially when you think about this, everything's a tool and you just need a brain and a hand to hold that
Mhm.
tool. Then what Dave's talking about is there's tons of different ways to build on top of that where you're not locked into someone else's system, including BrainDrive, right? It's an open
Yep.
architecture. And, every improvement benefits everyone else, right? And that's not what you're seeing with these closed systems. They have to build everything themselves. We're going to compose and make these Legos that anyone can snap them together. And that's what really unlocks the creativity and makes this a movement. And this is where no one wants to work and be a cog in a big tech wheel. Let's be honest. It might be, fancy to put on your LinkedIn that you're some VP at Facebook, but that means you're like 8 levels down and have 50 bosses and are in meetings all day, and it sucks. So this is, really what big tech cannot match once we get this flywheel spinning is they can't buy. There's people that just like the people on this call right now that can't be bought. We just would never go and work for that type of environment. And then you can't manufacture that type of community and grassroots movement and conviction. So, we'll have that on we're redoing the doc site now. We'll have that updated mission on there soon, but that's what Dave's referring to is it really like that's where you start to get an explosion of creativity and development because everyone knows they're not building for someone else's system, they're building for their own.
Yep. So in a lot of ways, and it should be important to note that while we have taken one project of software, archived it in almost every capacity, the architecture has stayed the same of what we wanted to accomplish. It's like down to the software, down to the community, people building off what we're doing. It's like if we just figured out as one, it's like we have to, like I said early on, it's like any only way they're going to be able to compete with us is to take their own project, shelve them, redo it. We took our own medicine, we took our own project, shelved it. We seen the writing, what was happening and say, okay, let's redo this. Let's do this better. Let's do this different. We even made some business changes. Like Dave is far more technical than he was a year ago. Yeah, and not afraid of the prompt anymore. So he's very much more into, hey, I want to understand. So it's like we spend now instead of 20 minutes on a call, we're going to spend an hour and 20 minutes because we're going to go through everything. And as long as Dave can understand it, that means I know what I'm doing. That's what
Yeah,
I
and
always
that
looked at that.
allows me to, I've always, done different types of product management,
Mhm.
and really building a business is just the business is the product,
Yep.
so, but I've never been able to get deep enough into the technicals to kind of understand how it needs to be laid out. And I still could never do it without AI and Dave, but with AI and the ability to wrap my head around everything with AI and then come into a conversation with Dave and be able to iron out the details, that allows me to leverage my skills a lot more within the partnership and the project to help, plan out these projects. And I want to
Yeah.
get even better at that. And that's actually one of the things I want to work on in the coming week is really mapping out this process,
Mhm.
for people and helping put together those implementation guides and all that Dave was talking about. So that's going to be my main tech thing for this week. How about you, Dave?
From mine going forward is going to be taking a process open code. I have a few hammered out skills, most of which I got from you and I just tweaked. I want to really push them a little further. I think that for markdowns and just direct information, they're great. But for coding, I think they could use some love so they understand that hey, for writing you do XYZ, but for coding you have a continual loop of you do something and you have tests that you have to perform when you do that one thing and then keep building on top of that until you're finished with that overall goal. And that's the huge difference I see in the skills. So I want to spend a little time this week while moving from a proof of work or proof of concept that we have now, turning that into a closer aligned proof of concept and bridging the gap to, hey, this is BrainDrive now. And that MVP coming to life because everything I'm doing starting from Saturday has been pushing the code so that, okay, you're now following the architecture, but now we have to follow the architecture and accomplish a goal. And that's a little different than a proof of concept. So we have to push that code a little along. And with that, push open code further along so it can do more weight of what I want to do because I want to now bridge the software. I can do two workers. I want two things going on. I have multiple components to work on, and there's no reason why that can't take place.
Okay, and the MVP is basically the library concept, which is modifying
Yep.
files, adding folders, deleting, updating, etc. CRUD
There you
capabilities
go. I was
within
gonna.
a markdown file system
Yep.
that lives on your computer in a folder called the library, BrainDrive library. And initially, it would just be you have to tell it to do everything, right? It's not going to do it by itself. You have to tell it to do everything. But this is my, interview spec build plan process that's been
Mhm.
very beneficial from a project management and really
Yep.
a life standpoint, that we're going to try to bring to life in V1 for non-technical people,
Yep.
that we're going to bring it together, bring it to life in the MVP for people who are a little more comfortable with the terminal.
Yep.
Basically, that's in a sentence,
Yep.
right?
That's a good three sentence, however you usually put it. There you go. That's what we're
Okay.
doing this
And
week.
that, where the division between BrainDrive and OpenCode, where the division between BrainDrive and BrainDrive leveraging OpenCode is in actually building that MVP. But once the MVP is built, you'll be interacting with your memory system, which is the library, with the BrainDrive engine and all of that,
Yeah,
correct?
correct, correct. It could be, in fact, I'll give an example, a very loose example. When the MVP is finished, V1 is finished, in fact. At that point, I would look at creating a component, which is basically open code, and it would be set up to run and take instructions. And much like when you would say, "Hey, what projects do I have that are active right now?" And it goes, "Oh, okay, you have these lists." You could go, um, "I'd like to be able to access this from any PC in my network." Now, because we took a local approach first, local is termed as my computer. You want to access from your network, you have to open it up then. And rather than, okay, how do these guys do it? The first step of open code being involved in your ecosystem would be you fire the question off and it goes to open code. It's built in your network. It looks through your code that you have, your config files, and it goes, okay, you need to change this file here, or would you like me to do it for you?
Right. And where's the line between BrainDrive and OpenCode as a tool? Well, at this point, BrainDrive is basically the hand and the brain, and OpenCode would be the tool, right?
Yes. Yep.
The external tool.
Yep.
Okay. And where is the line between what BrainDrive does and what OpenCode does?
BrainDrive's job is to determine what tool are we going to use? What tool accomplishes what the user wanted
Right.
to
So when
do?
I say I want to use my brain drive from any computer, I'm talking to my brain drive. It's going to the internal
Yep,
components to brain drive, and it's deciding, okay, we're going to need a coding tool for this. Let's
yep,
go use open code for that.
yes,
And so that's a great example of BrainDrive being the brain and
yep,
the digital hand that holds that tool, which is open code, which does the coding necessary to, and how we don't have to build a whole coding
yep,
agent within BrainDrive to do that. We just need BrainDrive to be the brain in the hand that knows when the user says, or the owner in this case,
yep,
you're always an owner, not a user at
yep,
BrainDrive. When you tell your BrainDrive, I want to make this change, the BrainDrive brain is smart enough to tell the hand
yep,
what tool is required for that change and to go do it. And
yep,
once you have that, the sky's the limit because eventually we can have like an interface and it's like, oh, I want my interface to be pink. And it's just like, it just changes it. Oh, I want my interface to have 16 pages, one for each
mhm,
cryptocurrency. Bam, there it is. And it's done.
yep.
Right. And so you're adjusting everything on the fly. And you really, at that point, the sky's the limit. Is if you can do it on a computer, you can do it with Brain Drive.
Yeah, and one of the things that'll be different from what BrainDrive can do in this ecosystem, whereas I know we all leverage MCP, but there are projects out there that are not MCP, and the ability to take that project, create what'll be like basically an MCP wrapper around it, so that you can assimilate and leverage that tool in your environment. So you could have this tool that is archaic. We'll go back to COBOL. It's a piece of crappy code, I know, but it works. So why change it, right? But it's just, hey, it takes this sub process in order to really get working. You build an MCP around it, and next thing you know, your brain drive's like, I got this every time. You don't even have to worry about
And
it.
you can handle security and all that type of
Yep,
stuff via that without having to, worry about your system being hacked, assuming the security is handled correctly via the MCP
yep,
server.
exactly.
Awesome. All right, this sounds great. And so basically, if I had to sum it up, we're taking our time here at the beginning to get the foundation right, but we should be speeding up rapidly once we get this MVP done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, because the key is about really we're building that process in open code to a point where we can compound it ourselves of, okay, this skill works. Now we can just call it over and over and over
Right.
again type thing.
Okay, great. I think that's probably good for today then, unless there's
Yep.
anything else you want to talk about.
Nope. That's where I'm at. Other
All
than I'm
righty.
curious, just so everybody knows, Nav is working on a proof of concept too. That is pretty key because it's like every developer does things different. So it'd be kind of curious, what did he pick? Because when we told him this on Saturday, just so anybody's watching, we made sure that it was like, hey, we're not going to. In fact, I had to shut up almost the whole thing. Dave was the only one talking, and we gave him the architecture, but no advice on what to do it in, with, how to do it, what can you do with that. So it'll be another example of what does somebody come up with this. Does it hold water twice? Because that's when you start to gather a little more confidence in the maturity of it. Because instead of saying, "Oh yeah, we got it working once by luck," no, hey, we started applying maturity to it,
And we
and
may
that's
discover better ways to do
yep,
things, the more people. And we encourage everyone, it's there, personalaiarchitecture.org. The GitHub's live. Go give it a try. There's a forum there on personalaiarchitecture.org. There's a forum at braindrive.ai, or sorry, community.braindrive.ai. So hit us up either place and let us know what you're working on, and we'd love to collaborate.
that's it for me right there.
All right, with that, we'll wrap it up here. Again, our mission here at BrainDrive is to build a superior user-owned alternative to big tech AI systems. We do these calls live streamed on YouTube every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and we post them on our forums over at community.braindrive.ai. So we'd love to have you participate in any at either one of those places or both. And with that, we'll see you next.